Welcome to a subtext video, this time about espresso. I'm Alex, and today we're going to be pulling a coffee that can be notoriously difficult to work with, and those are highly grown, washed Colombian coffees. Those coffees can be a little bit bright, a little bit difficult to balance, but I'm going to give you some tips to have some success at balancing the acidity, the sweetness, and bringing about all that flavor complexity in the espresso. But before we do, let me introduce our coffee. This beautiful washed pink bourbon from producer Alirio Ortega. For longtime subtext coffee drinkers, Alirio's coffee may ring familiar because back in 2021, we brought in this washed pink bourbon. It was super stunning, had that kind of tamarind, kiwi, cherry, cola flavor that we love from really highly grown, high quality pink bourbons. Alirio and his partner Anaíbe are part of a group called Los Guacheros. That's in Bruselas, Huila in Colombia. Los Guacheros, in addition to being a producers group that share knowledge, resources, they have an aim that we really care about, which is sustainability, especially with regards to soil health. Los Guacheros really focus on reducing chemical, synthetic inputs into their farming, really focusing on more biodynamic modes of farming. And so we've kind of seen that that's not just a sustainability thing, that's also a quality thing. We've seen that quality come through because of that soil health, because of that soil nutrition in the quality of the coffees. Now, back in 2022, the next year after we carried Alirio's coffee, we didn't get any of it because Alirio had decided for many reasonable reasons to sell his coffee as a community lot. So it wasn't separated at all. This year, we've kind of just short of begged one of our importing partners, Shared Source, to convince Alirio to sell us this coffee separated. So we bought the entire lot of this washed pink bourbon, and we're super happy we did because it doesn't disappoint. It is so flavorful. This is so much of what we care about at Subtext, really paying a premium for the distinctiveness of flavor, for the quality, and the traceability of getting directly producers' coffee and maintaining that traceability from origin to here. Now, like I said earlier, these coffees aren't always the easiest to work with. Highly grown Colombian coffees do have this vibrant, sparkly acidity, which tastes delicious as a filter, but as an espresso at concentrations of anywhere from 50% to 100% more than filter, we can run into some balance problems. But I'm going to give you a recipe for that for this specific coffee. This specific coffee is a bit particular because unlike some other Colombian coffees, it's super soluble, meaning if you do have some fancy equipment like a refractometer, you can see that this coffee extracts really high without actually having to pull super long shots. So one popular way with somewhat modern third wave espresso to pull shots is at what we'd call a 2-to-1 ratio. So you're using twice the amount of yield, the amount of espresso you get out of the machine, to the dose of your coffee. So let's say you're using an 18-gram dose, you'd be getting around 36 grams out. When you're pulling espressos like those from Subtext and other roasters, espressos with similar sensibilities to ours, where we're roasting light enough that you don't want to really taste any roast flavor, you want to taste all the complexity of the coffee, of course, you do get a little bit more acidity out of those coffees. Now, that's not actually that hard to balance. You're also preserving a lot of the natural sweetness of the coffee when you're working with really high quality coffees. Instead of a 2-to-1 ratio, you just have to push that ratio into the 2.5-to-1 or even the 3-to-1 range. How long you have to pull really depends on the coffee and how much you want to balance it, how soluble that coffee is. And I can tell you, I guess now, with experience, that Alirio's coffee, despite being a pretty light roast, you can get really good shots at a 2.5-to-1 ratio. What does that look like in terms of numbers? So we're going to be using, in an 18-gram basket, 17 grams in, so we're going to down dose a little bit. We're going to go for 42 grams of yield, so your espresso out is going to weigh 42 grams. And we're going to do that all relatively fast. Now, you won't be surprised that in some scenarios, you might want to push your time of espresso into the 30s, 30 seconds, 32, 34 seconds. But because Alirio's coffee is so soluble, we're only going to cap that off at 27 seconds, and it's going to deliver a really sweet, vibrant shot. I'll tell you this, our usual setup at the roastery is a little bit different than what's conventional. You know, a conventional setup uses 9 bars of pressure, it has 200 degrees, and again, it uses these days, if you're whatever you want to call it, specialty shop, a third wave shop, probably an 18-gram basket. We generally do things pretty different here at Subtext. We use this slayer, we have the pressure lower, we include pre-infusion, but for today's recipe, I want to make sure it's replicable even for home baristas, and so what we've done is set our machine to 9 bars. We've set our temperature to 200, and we're not going to be using any pre-infusion. So this should be a somewhat accessible recipe. Just one caveat, of course, how long you have to pull an espresso, how clean your espresso tastes. It does have a lot to do with your grinder. We're using this very nice and admittedly, you know, fancy in terms of burr technology, Malkonig E80. It has a really beautiful grind distribution, so we can pull shots longer without getting astringency. You might have to adjust your recipe according to your grinder, of course. But this is going to be a great starting point. So let's pull a shot. First things first, we're going to tear a portafilter and grind our coffee. Check that we got 17 grams in. We got a little much, we're just going to remove a little bit. Pretty close, within 0.2 grams. Now I'm tapping the sides of the portafilter. What I want to do is really distribute the coffee nicely. And at this stage, you have two other options. You can either tamp it like this. You know, this actually looks pretty good. I would be pretty happy. But let's say your grinder at home is a little clumpier or hasn't distributed as evenly. Maybe it's a little denser. Maybe you can't tap distribute to distribute better. You have two options. You could either use something like this. This is a WDT tool. It's these kind of thin 0.6 millimeter needles. And what you're going to do is just go in your coffee bed and make little concentric circles, half a centimeter deep, until it looks pretty even and you've broken up any clumps that your grinder has built. Again, I didn't really need to do it, but just for demonstration. Alternatively, you may have a distribution tool like this. This is the BT Wedge by St. Anthony Industries, and this does a really good job at grooming the top of your portafilter, the top of your bed. Now, if you have lots of clumps or unevenness at the bottom of your bed, this isn't going to do an amazing job at distributing. So just keep that in mind. We always suggest tap distributing for that. Okay. That's it before tamping. We almost look like we've already tamped this. So we're going to take our tamper. I don't have to really focus on tamping evenly. Brush off any grinds. And there we have it. We have our coffee prepared. And now we're going to hope that we get about 42 grams of coffee in 27 seconds. I'm just going to purge, make sure my group head's clean. Insert, and go. Pretty good. We're in, you know, half a gram of that 42 gram target. Once you pulled your espresso, I would suggest stirring it. Now let's give it a taste. Right away, the aroma is really interesting. Like, again, I mentioned that tamarind, yellow, golden, kiwi smell, that kind of ripe cherry smell. There's also almost some marigold, some florality, and that's not too irregular with Pink Bourbon. It's a really beautiful smelling espresso. You know, it's a far cry from that kind of bitter, stale espresso smell so many people are used to. And again, the thing that turns people away from these kinds of espressos is that it might be a little bit hard to balance them. So let's see how we did there. You know, it doesn't even taste too light-bodied. It's not syrupy. You know, you're not going to get syrupy shots in that 2.5 to 3 to 1 range. But it still has body, it still has weight on your palate, and there is tons of sweetness in this coffee. You know, there's, again, tons of that macerated cherry flavor, which is really wonderful. I really hope this was helpful. You know, we've included this coffee in our subscription for February. We liked it so much. It's something very different, and I really think it's something worth trying. A lot of people write off some of these single origin espressos. So give it a shot. Let us know how it goes, and look out for some more instructional videos, including some more deep dives into how to work with espresso, especially for coffees that are a little bit more challenging to work with in the future. See you next time.